Once upon a time, in a land of rolling hills, sparkling rivers, and villages that seemed to hum with the quiet rhythm of everyday life, there lived a young girl named Cinderella, whose heart was as pure as the morning sun reflecting off the dewdrops on the meadow grass, and whose spirit remained unbroken despite the trials that fate had cruelly laid before her, for she had lost her dear mother when she was very small, and her father, a kind and gentle man of modest means and great patience, had remarried after some years to a woman whose heart seemed to be made of stone, cold and unyielding, and who brought with her 2 daughters, each more vain and selfish than the last, who delighted in making Cinderella's life miserable, assigning her endless chores from dawn until dusk, scrubbing floors until her hands were raw, cooking meals that were often lavishly enjoyed by her stepsisters while she nibbled on scraps, sewing gowns she would never wear, and tending the fire that seemed to demand more wood than any girl could carry. Yet throughout it all, Cinderella endured not with bitterness or hatred, for she had a gentle heart and a kind soul, and she found solace in small moments of joy, like the chirping of birds outside her window, the feel of the soft wind through the garden, or the memory of her mother's lullabies that seemed to echo in her mind whenever despair threatened to settle too deeply. And sometimes she would escape into the world of imagination, dreaming of faraway lands where kindness was rewarded and cruelty held no sway, where she might walk freely through sunlit meadows, laugh without fear, and perhaps, one day, meet someone whose heart matched the depth of her own, someone who would see her for who she truly was, beneath the soot and the ashes, beneath the rags and the chores, and who would treasure her gentle spirit above all else. And it was in these quiet moments, while the hearth crackled and the shadows danced along the walls, that Cinderella nurtured a quiet hope, delicate yet persistent, that someday life might turn toward light and joy, a hope that gave her strength to rise each day, brush her hair, tie her apron, and face her relentless stepmother and stepsisters, with patience and a smile, small though it might be. And as she went about her daily tasks, she often spoke softly to the mice that scurried about the house, the birds that perched near the window, and even the mice she had once called friends, telling them her dreams, sharing her little secrets, and in return, they offered her companionship and comfort, a tiny rebellion against the cruelty that sought to surround her completely. And though the days blended into one another, each seemingly longer than the last, her spirit remained unbroken, her hope unyielding, until one day, a royal proclamation arrived, carried by a herald whose voice rang through the village square with the weight of excitement and expectation, announcing that the king, wise and benevolent, had decreed a grand ball at the palace, a celebration so magnificent that all the young women of the kingdom were invited, for the prince, the king's only son, was to choose a bride, and the news spread like wildfire through the kingdom, reaching the ears of every household, including Cinderella's, where it stirred a mixture of excitement and dread, for her stepmother immediately began measuring and planning, summoning her daughters to choose gowns of glittering silk and jewels, while cruelly reminding Cinderella that she would remain behind, that she was unworthy of such splendor, that the palace and the ball were not places for someone like her. And though Cinderella's heart sank, she did not allow herself to despair openly, instead retreating to the small garden behind the house, where she sat quietly among the blooming flowers, inhaling their fragrance, letting the soft breeze caress her face, and dreaming of what it would be like to glide across a polished marble floor, to hear laughter and music, to feel the eyes of someone truly seeing her. And it was there, in the quiet solitude of her longing, that the world shifted ever so slightly, for as the last rays of sun touched the tips of the garden roses, a soft glow appeared before her, shimmering and radiant, and from that glow emerged her fairy godmother, a figure of warmth and magic, who looked upon Cinderella with eyes full of kindness and understanding, and spoke in a voice that seemed to ripple with the gentle power of promise, offering to make Cinderella's dream come true, to allow her to attend the ball, to step into a world that had always seemed so distant. And with the wave of her wand, she transformed Cinderella's worn and soiled clothes into a gown of delicate silk, the color of moonlight, sparkling with tiny diamonds that caught the light with every movement, and upon her feet she placed slippers made of the finest glass, delicate yet perfectly fitted to her gentle, hard-working feet, and with a touch of magic, the fairy godmother turned a humble pumpkin in the garden into a magnificent golden carriage, drew up mice into proud white horses, and created footmen and a coachman from the creatures who had been Cinderella's companions. Yet she warned with a solemn smile that the magic would last only until the clock struck midnight, a limitation that Cinderella accepted with gratitude and a flutter of excitement, and so it was that she rode to the palace, her heart pounding with anticipation and wonder, and as she entered the grand ballroom, her presence caused a hush to fall over the assembled guests. The chandeliers glittered above her, and the prince, upon seeing her, was immediately captivated, drawn not just to her beauty, but to the grace and kindness that seemed to radiate from her very being, and as the orchestra played, they danced together, moving in perfect harmony, laughing softly, sharing whispered words that hinted at connection and understanding, and for the first time in her life, Cinderella felt truly seen, truly cherished. Yet as the hour grew late, the distant chime of the palace clock reminded her of the fleeting nature of the magic, and with a sudden pang of fear, she fled, leaving behind one of her glass slippers, a token of her presence, a fragile clue for the prince, who watched in astonishment as she disappeared into the night, and from that moment, he became determined to find her, traveling the kingdom, carrying the slipper, trying it on the feet of every young woman, each attempt bringing hope and disappointment in equal measure, until he arrived at Cinderella's home, where her stepsisters, in a mixture of vanity and desperation, tried to force their feet into the delicate glass, failing miserably, until, at last, Cinderella, shyly and humbly, tried it on, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her alone, and with that, the prince recognized her, and joy overflowed in both their hearts, and they were soon married in a ceremony filled with laughter, music, and celebration, where even the kingdom seemed to rejoice, and though her stepsisters had once been cruel, Cinderella forgave them, with a gentle heart, for she understood that kindness was stronger than resentment, and thus, in a palace filled with warmth and love, Cinderella and the prince began their new life together, a life of happiness, adventure, and the quiet, enduring joy that comes from having a heart that remains pure, hopeful, and unbroken. And, from that day forward, Cinderella's days were no longer filled with chores and sorrow, but with laughter, love, and the promise that goodness, patience, and hope are always rewarded in the end. And so, as the sun set behind the castle towers, and the stars appeared one by one in the velvet sky, the story of Cinderella became a tale told throughout the kingdom, a story of kindness, resilience, and magic, a story whispered to children as they drifted off to sleep, and a story that reminded everyone who heard it that no matter how hard life may seem, a gentle heart, patience, and a little bit of magic can change everything.